I'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I'll introduce the members of the panel. To my far left is Mr. Maurice Therian. To my immediate left is Ms. Linda McFadgen. My name is Stu McPherson. I'll be chairing the hearing. Representing the City of Winnipeg Assessment Taxation Department is Mr. Ken Wong. And the secretary for today's hearing is Ms. Michelle Neatman. We hear applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application. We'll limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to those matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that the comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council. It's independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. If you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they so wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave, and the process will repeat for each item on the docket. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. We'll receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. This information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. I'll swear the parties in, please. Just housekeeping, if you do have a cell phone, please put that on silent.
Can you state your full name, please? Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Can you state your full name, please? Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Neufeld. You're representing the owners of 7 properties today. It's the amount of assessed value that we're dealing with only. Thank you. We'll just deal with them as they're listed on the docket. So the first property we'll hear is 510 Burnell. When you're ready, Mr. Assessor, we'll hear from you.
Mr. Chairman, just for my curiosity, and I don't know if it's going to pertain to the subject of the first one, perhaps you'd like to go ahead with the recommendation on 500 Burnell. It's sort of the system. They're different owners and different qualities, but I was curious what the deal was.
Actually, no, we'll leave that till the end. We'll deal with that at the end.
Okay, I just, all right, I'll ask him the question. Thanks.
Certainly. Mr. Wong, 510 Burnell.
Sure. 510 Burnell is the subject property. The roll number is 130-300-86100. It's a residential apartment block that's 2 stories high. It was built in 1969 and has 28 suites with 26 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $799 to get a potential income of $268,000. We use a 2.6% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $251,000. And we used a 53% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $120,000. Capped at 5.3% to have an estimated market value of $2,279,000. That's about $81,000 per unit. On page 4 are our rent comparables, showing that the rents we've used are in line with what's on the market. Page 5 is information on how we derived our cap rates. They range from 4 to 7.3%, with the majority of them falling between 4.9 and 5.3%. 6 are so cap rate sales. The multifamily section, the range is from 4 to 6%. And on the bottom of the page, 500 footage at 4.07%. On page 8 is a picture of the subject property. On page 9 is their income statement for 2017. Their operating income for 2017 is $143,000, which is 23,000 higher than what the model is estimated at $120,000. The actual performance is supports the model, and is probably indicating that the assessed value is a little bit under assessed, but I asked that you maintain the assessed value at $2,279,000.
Thank you. Mr. Newfeld, questions for the assessor?
Page 3, is this all model?
I believe so, yes.
There is another property on this docket, 500 Burnell. I understand that there was a recommendation. Are you able to tell me what that is?
I don't see why.
I understand that you, well, I don't know if you can object on the basis of
How does that relate to the evidence that I'm presenting?
I don't know if you can ask that question. I think it's a procedural issue. If it's going to come up in this hearing,
Well, Mr. Newfeld, you're certainly welcome to stay after you've done your presentation and get the crux of the recommendation.
I would like to insist on this, and there are many, many reasons for it. This building is the twin to 500 Burnell. At one point in time, they were common ownership. They've gone in, now they're separate ownership. So I would just like to know if the assessment department is, because they have a model, if there's any differences in the two.
There are differences.
Right. So I'm going to ask the chair then if you would reconsider my question and ask for. I'm not sure if anything will come out of this, but I think for perhaps fairness, I'd like to know what it was.
Let's take a very short recess. I'll confer with the panel members on this as well. So if you would just
Sorry, bear in mind that if we followed the docket, I would have heard this by now.
Call the hearing back to order. As to your request, Mr. Neufeld, we have started hearing evidence on this property, so we are going to continue with this property and make our decisions based on that. But we will, because of your request, we will hear 500 Burnell as the next property before we continue on with the rest.
Okay.
So if you'd like to continue with your questioning.
Thank you. Have you inspected the site?
I'm not.
Within your records, do you show any major repairs taking place over the last 6 or 7 years?
I don't believe so.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Thury, questions for the assessor?
Yeah, just, I think he's touched on it, but page 9 is the mailer. And the income one is higher, and the NOI is higher as well than the model says on page 3. Did you analyze the mailer at all to see if there's anything that's inappropriate and what's in page 9?
It seems fairly normal. I mean, we don't have any more detail than what has been presented.
Yeah, but you know, I guess sometimes when the assessor looks at this and they say this doesn't apply, this doesn't apply. So I'm trying to check the veracity or the approximation of the NOI in relation to what makes sense.
Yeah, I would say everything seems to be normal. Their repair and maintenance seems a tiny bit low, but it's still, it might be $900 a unit, which is, I would say, within the range. I would say. Yeah, it appears to me that everything seems reasonable.
Okay. The other point is obviously 1969 building with a cap rate of 5.30. I know it's in the range that you mentioned on page 5. It's a low rise, I don't know if it's a B, but anyway.
I guess we don't distinguish.
You don't? Okay. Would you know what cap was used on the last cycle for this one?
I don't know.
We don't know. 69, do you know what condition this building is in?
I've not inspected the property. Based off of the income, and it appears to be in good condition.
Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden?
I have no further questions.
I have no question. Just clarification, it's modeled so it's set at average condition for its age?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, we'll hear from you, please.
Thank you. This building was once part of two identical buildings, and I believe the sale of the one dated back about 10 years, and this building has remained in the hands of the individual who owned it, and it's managed by my client, and generally it's below par for the area because they haven't really been, there's more deferred maintenance than in most apartments. We have the income on page 1, and what we've done is the standard way we usually do this is look at the income and rely on the last year of income, and then look at the expenses and average them out over 3 years. Now, in this case, in 2015, you can see that we have put in a number of $154,540 for expenses. We've actually included that mailer, page 5, and the actual number for expenses was $268,782, and in there was we highlighted a roof replacement. So it was a one-item expense that happened in 1 year. So what we've done with it instead, well, our option was to leave that in, and then our average expenses over the term 3 years average would be $181,950, indicating an NOI of $95,840. But generally, you wouldn't see an investor doing that. You would see a longer amortization of a roof replacement. So what we've done is we've taken the $118,329 out, and then replace it with a 10-year amortization of that cost, and that ends up with an NOI of $123,449 as indicated. When we find large repairs, and again, not a capital expense, that would lead to an improvement, it's a necessary repair. So this is what the appropriate methodology would be, and perhaps one would debate, do you use a 10-year amortization or longer, and that would, falls under the discretion of the appraiser based on his review of the property. I have inspected this property and it's not in the greatest shape, so I think a quicker depreciation of it over 10 years was called for. The only error that's on this report, we've had a very busy time 2 weeks ago, and I didn't have a chance to review this. There was a confusion between this property and another property I heard yesterday. This property does not have the structural issue. It was a different property, and so the person who prepared this is a bit confused. Therefore, I'm just modifying the cap rate to 6.5% rather than 7%, and the resulting number is $1,899,215, rounded to $1,899,000. Cap rates I'm relying on are on page 35 and 36. On page 35, the second one is 1830 Portage. Its similarity to the subject is striking because it was owned by a person and managed by the same client who managed this one, and the deferred maintenance issues were also in place. This property went on the market, was on for several months, no takers, so eventually the management company made an offer, and based on the pro forma of the time, a cap rate of 6.58% was indicated. They've actually had some costs after purchase, but they're of a different nature. The other ones I was looking at were on page 36. A slightly older sale, 600 Charles. This was purchased by a client of ours who appraised the property, and the indicated cap rate from actual income was 7.04%. And lastly, 26 and 45 Hargrave. These are the ones I'll be referring to a fair bit today. This is a renovated property built in 1959. It was renovated in 2011. It's actually 2 units, one economic unit though. And after renovation, it was stabilized with absorption. Was filled back up, and our company brought it to market. The 6.62% comes from a pro forma that was prepared for the property as representing the income on the property, and prepared by the vendor and reviewed by the purchaser, who made his decision on that basis. So we have 3 very solid sales, indicating that properties of this type would be realistically 6.5%, and what I very much like about these 3 I've presented to you is that none of them involved a renovation scheme. And you've likely heard a lot of debate from should you use renovation cap rates. The answer is an absolute no, and the reason why is there's 2 major reasons. One is the going-in rate would represent what the owner receives for payment, but it doesn't represent what the vendor was willing to invest. And if you don't consider the vendor's investment goals, then you miss the point of having a cap rate. The second is that the definition of market value precludes using anything that involves creative financing or arrangements other than the normal. So a renovation scheme would be considered as creative financing or financial considerations that don't represent market. And the stable number is, for this style of unit, is 6.5. Colliers produces a report on, and we've given you the old one from 16 and the new one from 18. Now, our multifamily low-rise is between 5 and 6%. Now, this is subject property, isn't representative of a property we sell or track. And it also includes, when we do our cap rate calculation, we also include closing costs, such as land title transfer fees and commissions, which elevate the price and indicate a lower cap rate. On page 24, we have a conversion chart, how we convert, how the salespeople do it to what the market perceives, and our low-rise range is 5.5 to 6.5. Given everything I've said, placing it at the high end of the scale is appropriate. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wong, questions for the applicant?
Yes, you had mentioned that you had inspected the property and there was a lot of deferred maintenance. Do you have any, I guess, documentation as to what type of deferred maintenance there is?
My observations from my inspection were just general maintenance, such as the common areas had flooring that was well past its expiration date. A typical suite had very old appliances. Bathrooms were showing signs of requiring some maintenance in the caulking area and general degradation of the flooring. Issues like that, it was just all around maintenance. It would be a turnover. On a turnover, you would want to be spending a bit more than just a paint job, so the suite turnover would be several $1,000s required, and it had just been left. This day and age, as rents rise, the expectation of a tenant is that when you're getting a new, renting a suite, you're going to be given one that's in better condition. And so repair and maintenance costs go up for the turnovers, and this one hasn't really been spending it. And their only big expenditure had been a required roof repair, so that things just get left.
And in your you're saying that you're including capital expenditures in your valuation?
No, I don't consider it a capital expenditure. It's a capital expenditure would be something you spend in order to improve the property that hopefully will generate more income.
Okay, so you're saying that the roof replacement is not a capital expenditure?
No, it's a long lived expense.
Okay, so you're saying it's not capital?
No, I wouldn't consider it capital.
Okay.
It's an amortized expense, a long-term amortized expense.
Okay. Did you prepare this brief?
No.
That would be all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Therian, any questions for the applicant?
When was the inspection made? By yourself?
Yes, it was. It wasn't in the near past. It was, I think, 3 years ago. We were reviewing it at the time after. Well, it was while the roof was being done, which is 2015.
So it's about 4 years.
Yeah.
And you mentioned how what's been maintained, okay. Do you know what the level of vacancy is in this building, or what's been the history of the vacancy here?
Well, I can figure it out.
Well, what I'm trying to find out is, you know, if it's in reasonable condition and is being rented, probably a strategy of the owner. Keep it like this.
Well, there's, this particular motivation by ownership is to spend as little as possible until you have to. And that's you know, a common occurrence in blogs like this.
Quickly on the vacancy thing, could you give us a quick
I'm just looking.
answer?
I'm looking. Well, I looked at 2 years so far. I'm just on 4. Generally, vacancy appears to be marginal. There's not much indicated here that there's any vacancy problem whatsoever. That it's been, occupancy rates have been very strong.
Okay. Obviously, your cap rate, although you've mentioned page 35 and 37 or 33 and 35, but also on your page 20, which is the Colliers rates on multifamily, it's 5 to 6, and on the page 24, I don't know what date that is, 5.5 to 6.5. So maybe, I think you did mention that.
Page 24 is,
Do you know what date that is?
yeah, it's current. It's 2018.
Okay, because I don't see any date on it.
It's, right, it relates to page 20. The ones published on page 20 come exclusively from our investment group. And their standard of doing workups is to include additional costs, closing fees, legal fees, land title transfer fees, and in some cases, expenses required after purchase. They generally work out to about a half-point difference in the cap rate between the way that an appraiser does it and between the way an assessor should do it. So we have to review them. Now, I might have a workup here somewhere that I've provided in the past to give you a sample of how that happens. But page 20 generally is advertising. Page 24 is going behind the scenes. I did another analysis a few weeks ago. We're now we're owned by Colliers International, so we have access to cross-Canada rates, and we actually now can get the details of the actual sales that go into this, the brochure here. And what we found when we reviewed them is that there were a fair amount of properties in the study that shouldn't even have been in the study. For example, student housing and seniors housing, because they don't belong in the multifamily category. So when we examine the rates, the Colliers rates were generally slightly lower than market would indicate. Good product. It was pretty straight right across the country that the best products were 5.5%, and then the ranges were from 5 to about 8%, the type of products Colliers sells when we saw the raw data. And that's more representative of page 24, when we got to see the raw data.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. McFadden.
Right, on your analysis, Mr. Nizal, is you're showing adjustment of 11,833, which is just over 4% of the gross income. What would those adjustments include?
That's, I amortized the roof over 10 years.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Like, I took it out of it would have normally been put in 2015 as one big expense of 118,000. So we removed it from 15 and re-amortized it over 10 years. It's to stabilize large repairs. And what we want to make it clear and transparent is that this type of large repair differs from any sort of a renovation scheme where the nature of the unit is changed so that you can have a rental increase. This is a very large capital repair, and generally in apartments there are two types that you'll see: a boiler or a roof. And from time to time we have another property yesterday where there was a grade beam that had to be repaired. Those don't go into, the other one we had yesterday was a stairwell that had to be replaced. Those don't go into an improvement on the property. It's just a very large repair. And a cap rate accounts for some of this in the risk category. Very often a boiler might cost $20,000 or so in that neighborhood, so you can deal with it in just a cap, and it has to take it into account. Which is one of the things in stabilization is that if you don't use the right period and you don't examine your costs, you can have a mistaken NOI. But a large one, like I said, the roof, the grade beam, the stairwell issues we on one property, they require re-amortization of the costs over time.
Understood, thank you.
Is that your only question?
One question.
Yeah, I had a question on that too. So it's your assertion that it's not really a capital cost in as far as improving the property to the point where you're going to generate more income, but it's a necessity as a replacement because the asset is worn out.
Yes, it's the theory behind it is that when you're appraising an apartment block, you take your costs and put them into one of three categories: immediate costs, say utilities; a short-lived item, which is up to 10 years; a long-lived item, which could be up to 20 years. And in apartments, like a short-lived item might be the finish, the rugs, the appliances. We usually just leave those right in the statement because they get replaced on turnover. So if you have a 30-unit block, you're replacing 3 appliances every year, just as a matter of policy. So there's no point going back through your calculations and adding in how much did I do this year and spreading it over 10 years. Then there's the large ones. The boiler system, for example, Bill, if you replace your boiler with in-suite units, baseboard, that would end up being capital because what you're doing with that is putting in meters and offloading the cost to your tenants, so we wouldn't even consider that. But if you had to replace an actual boiler and nothing was going to change, then we would look at that as amortized over a longer period.
Okay, and do you know whether this was the original roof that was replaced?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I just wondered, because if it is, would it not make more sense? If you're gonna amortize it, would you not likely amortize it over the life of that particular replacement? And that way it would be sort of like having a reserve.
Not for a roof, because there's no finite guarantee. Like, if we made the assumption that it was the original roof, and so that would have been 45 years. At several points along the way, there would have had to been ongoing maintenance, maybe $10,000, $20,000 every 6, 7, 10 years for retarring and redoing the edging and sometimes doing the soffits. So,
Which would be included as
then that
as an
gets,
expense.
then that gets put into the expense category as an
Right.
actual expense for that period.
Right.
The replacement is a larger amount, and, so, you know, the original construction is part of the original asset base, when you're looking to make money off it, it's what you have to spend to earn that rent. And the renewal of it is, has to be looked at the same way. And we're also trying to watch accounting procedures as well, because in accounting, their procedures are slightly different. Basically, you want to accelerate your depreciation as much as you can for tax purposes. That's what somebody wants. For appraisal purposes, we have to do what's reasonable. I would expect within 10 years we're going to need some maintenance, regardless. And that was my decision on 10 years. And I can understand you could question and argue 20 years. I think by 20 years you've been spending money in years 10 to 20 on repairs, because water has a nasty way of causing costs on all commercial properties.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wong, desire for summation on this property?
No, I'd just like to present some rebuttal.
Okay. What are you rebutting?
Just the cap rates and I just wanted to present some information on the values that have been requested.
Would you show that to the applicant
Yeah.
first, please?
I'm sorry, there's some objectionable material in here which involves a copyright infringement. I reported it earlier this week through 311, and they forwarded it to City Legal Services. The city doesn't have written authorization to reproduce any part of an appraisal, and that same comment is included in there. So I can't force anyone to stop breaking the law. I can only inform the board that that is what's happening, it's been reported, and I can only advise the assessor that this would be a continued violation of copyright.
Having said that, is it your desire to present this information?
Have they, you've submitted an inquiry into 311. Has anything resulted from that?
I haven't heard back from them yet.
Okay.
Have you had discussions with your supervisor on this matter?
Yes.
I have also had discussions with your supervisor on this matter, and I thought we had a general understanding that appraisals were going to be avoided. I'm not pinning him down for his statements, but it was all.
And is this all an appraisal
No,
we're
no,
talking
there's
about?
only one page in there that's.
So there's only one page you object to?
Correct. Oh, I didn't look at the second sheet, but I just saw one, anything else would be new.
No, this is exactly the same.
What was the second piece of paper? I just quickly looked at it, sorry, here, I'm just to save you trouble. Sorry, this was, oh, okay, no, it was, you know which page it was, I just wanted to show you that, this page here,
Yes.
so.
I mean, it's the same as presented before.
And that's when I made the objection, that's when I reported it, and I know that City Legal Services has been sent this. I can't control the speed that you respond in, that the city responds in.
Well, I mean, he's implying that, you know, we've done something wrong and that we're infringing on copyrights, but he has a request to 311, and probably it doesn't seem like anything else.
Well,
That's fine, Mr. Wong, if you want to present it. We'll
Again,
place the weight on it. that we think is-
my warning here is that because it has been reported, I've requested that City Legal review it for whether it is a charge that can be laid or whether it becomes a civil matter. In either case, I'm not here to tell anybody whether it's right or whether it's wrong. I'm here to say that if the matter is deemed to be this, and they don't investigate it properly, that this would be a continuing of use, knowing that you had a copyright infringement. Obviously, their defense, in their defense, if they weren't aware of a copyright infringement, which I don't think is the case, and they handed it out, the remedy could be easy, saying, oh, we apologize and withdraw it all. But knowing it's a copyright infringement shows forethought, and I'm not here to judge or tell you what's going to happen. As the board may or may not be aware, I have filed a statement of claim in Court of Queen's Bench on this matter and other matters. So there will be civil litigation on it. And again, I'm not here to tell anyone, I just, you do what you want.
Mr. Wong, are you wanting to present that, or
Well, I
can
mean,
you present it by leaving
Mr.
out that one page that's objectionable, or?
Well, Mr. Neufeld, do you have anything like from your legal department that is indicating that this is, I guess, erroneous in any sort of way?
I sent a copy of the disclaimer that was in the appraisal mentioned.
No, I mean from your legal. Do you have something that says that?
We're not at that stage, and even if we were, we're not out to share our legal position with you. I'm only here to say that a report was made, and it is the subject of ongoing litigation. If you want to continue to use it, that's your business. If you want to rethink it and discuss this with your supervisor, it's your business. I don't want anything I say to imply a threat, because this is not the forum for that. It is merely, this is what has happened.
Okay, so you don't have anything to present?
Well, no, it's like thinking about things like respectful workplace policy or any sort of other abuse sort of situation. Once a party has been made aware of it, there is.
Yeah, but made aware of what?
Okay, I think we're going far too deep on this. So, my question to you is, do you want to present that as rebuttal evidence over the objection of the applicant, or do you want to present just some of it that he doesn't object to?
Or present it all?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I like to present it all.
Okay. The board will take it under advisement that the applicant objects to one of it on the basis of it being presented prior to the board, but inappropriately. So we'll place the weight on it that we think is appropriate.
I don't think this is an issue the board has to judge on. I think it was just, if you see somebody doing something wrong that you believe is wrong, that I shouldn't speak up.
Okay, Mr. Wong?
Okay, the single sheet is just like I wasn't aware of the values, but like a single sheet is just to summarize all the values that we have in appeal today, and just to show that in our view, the market has increased over the years, and
So are we comparing assessments here, Mr. Wong? Is that basically what this is showing? Because the board is not amenable to comparing assessments.
okay.
As I said in my opening, we don't consider that as evidence of market value.
Okay. Okay. If that's the view, I'm fine with not talking to it.
Okay, thank you.
The multiple page document is just on the front page. It just shows for 3 of the cap rate sales that were presented by the applicant. 228 Notre Dame. Colliers presented the cap rate as 5.53%, and 1830 Portage as 6.58%, and 333 Ward as 5.5%. The information provided from us is indicating the cap rates to be 4.16% and 4.8% and 5.0%.
And that's contained where?
I'm sorry, what,
Your APD cap rate, is that?
it's the following pages.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. The very first page is just a very simple.
Brief summary.
Yeah. And then then say page 3 is for 228 Notre Dame, where that's how that 4.16 was calculated.
Okay.
Yeah. And on page 5, that's how the 4.8% was calculated. And for the 333 Ward, the cap rate used in the appraisal for 333 Ward was 5%, and it's based off of 18 sales. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. Mr. Neufeld.
Yes, thank you. So this information is comprised mostly of mailer returns to the city of Winnipeg in dispute an actual sale.
Yes. Well, it's just two. This is our calculated cap rate.
These come from the mailers, the information, correct? Let's page 3. These are from the mailers?
Yes.
And your latest mailer was received in 2015 or from the 2015 fiscal year?
Yes, that was the most recent information that we had.
Well, which one was it? Was it received in 15 or from the 15 fiscal year?
15 year.
Okay, so received sometime in 2016.
Yes.
So a year and a half prior to the sale. Is that correct?
Yes.
And do you believe that the vendor and the purchaser took the city's income and expense statements and advised, come to an agreement to sell on that basis?
I don't know.
Same questions with page 5.
Well, it's sold in 2000. It's sold in early 2016, and the 2015 information is the most recent information available.
So a year out of date?
No, it's exactly prior to the sale date.
How do you peg that? It was from
Well, it's sold in Q1 in 2016,
Right.
and the information used in the calculation was 2015. So it would be for the period immediately prior to sale.
Was it for the calendar year or the fiscal year?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So it could be a year out of date. Now, at the, again, same question, do you know anything about the transaction?
I don't know what you mean.
Were you involved with the transaction?
I was not involved in the transaction, no.
And in the mailer, did you notice any abnormalities in the expenses in the final year?
For which property?
1830 Portage? You know, like sometimes people spend a lot of money in the last year to fix it up, to put it up for sale. Did you notice that abnormality?
If you'd like to make an opinion on that, you could.
Well, it's not an opinion, I'm just looking at the statements you provided, and the repairs and maintenance were $37,783 for the final period, yet in the period before, $24,427. period before that, 16,067. Would not the final statement be a bit of an abnormality? For example.
Portage?
Yes, for example, could you have stabilized them?
Yeah, I did. I used the 14 and 13 expenses because the 15 expenses seemed abnormally high.
Page 7. Is your department, to your knowledge, in possession of a document that says no one other than the addressee should rely upon this opinion until first obtaining written authorization from the addressee and this appraisal?
This appraisal was presented at a hearing, and it's a matter of public record.
Are you aware, I asked you a question, are you aware of this disclaimer contained within this appraisal?
We have the appraisal.
Are you aware that it also says in there that possession does not provide reliance?
I'm not aware.
Here's my question, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Therian.
I think I might have one question. I'm looking at the 1830 Portage, which, and I'm looking at the mailer, so I know there's no, on page 12. And I see this is ending the 31st of December 2015.
Yes.
And then you're referring on page 5 to a sale and a first quarter of 2016.
Yes.
So are you, I'm just trying to understand, are you basing that 4.80% on the mailer alone?
The mailer information.
And the sale?
The mailer information from 2015, 14, and 13, and the sale, yes.
And the sale? And that's how you're arriving at your 4.80?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I had, thank you.
Ms. McFadden?
I have no further questions.
Nor do I. Thank you.
Sorry, just a quick follow-up question. In any of these properties that you brought forward, did you have a discussion, or anyone in the department have a discussion with vendor or purchaser?
I can't say.
Okay. Was there a summation that was recorded for this?
No.
Yes, there is. The standards that the city assessor are work under are generally the IAAO standard, and they're very similar to the Appraisal Institute. The difference being in the Mass Appraisal Standard for the IAAO, which is what the assessor is working under. All standards say the same thing, that if you're going to use evidence and present it at a hearing, you have a requirement for due diligence. That due diligence is to have this verified with both parties if possible, or people knowledgeable to the sale. There's the issue. The stress is on the sale, not on mailer, not on third-party information, because you may as well have just gone to the internet. I've testified under oath that our involvement in these sales, my involvement wasn't third-party on those sales I quoted. I stick to first-party involvement, because we can at least then speak to that level of due diligence required. 1830 Portage, it was put on the market. A pro forma was prepared with the assistance of the property manager. No takers, the property manager ended up buying it. And based on that pro forma, that's called a meeting of the minds. Now, people don't, I've said this time and time again, when the vendor and the purchaser get together and they decide to sell, they don't trot out their income and expense forms they sent to the city and say, how much will you give me for this? It does not happen that way. It's a much more a much deeper process. So the city's, perhaps if they care to complain, the complaint should be that the numbers don't match the information they were given. But then ask the question why. Don't use it to try to discredit somebody who's doing their job. The reason why it's happening is because there's a difference in when it happened. And there's lots of reasons for it. In 1830 Portage, we were well aware that the owner had a desire to sell. One of the owners had passed away. They wanted to sell it, but they were spending some money in the later years fixing it up and had made a lot of investigations of the market, made people aware that it was coming up. In Notre Dame, which we never even got to, the information is sadly a year and a half out of date. And this was also my client who purchased this, so I wasn't involved firsthand, but I did get an opportunity to interview the purchaser and the agent working for the vendor, which satisfies my due diligence requirements. So if somebody's going to come and insult the hearing, insult the process, insult the board, try to discredit me on information that's not pertinent, that wasn't even researched, I think that that's improper. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this point, we're going to take a short break. Okay, we'll call the hearing back to order. Next property we're going to deal with, Mr. Assessor, is 500 Burnell. So when you're ready.
The subject property is 500 Burnell. The roll number is 130-300-80000. The current assessed value is $2,395,000. Having discussed this property, the actual performance with the owner, I'd like to make a recommendation for a revised value to $2,126,000.
Okay, and will you tell us what that's based on, please?
It's based off of a revised operating income of $112,701. At a 5.3 cap rate. The owner is agreeable to this value. I can show you an email if you'd like.
If you want to present it, that's fine. Thank you. That's your presentation then?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Therian, questions?
I'm just curious here. It's on page 1, you had a 2-story building, and her appeal, or I think it's a lady? No, maybe not.
No.
But the property is a 3-story walk-up, so I don't know. Maybe you could sort that out.
Well, it should be
two-
just the owner's definition is slightly different than.
Because there's no pictures.
Yeah.
Oh, here's here. Oh, well, yeah, I can see why she's...
So you can, I mean, you might be, like, is it a 2 or a 3?
Oh, I see, okay, because I can see on page 8.
Yeah.
Just curious when I looked at this. Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Ms. McFadden.
I have no questions.
So is it safe to say that this is more likely described as a 2.5-story walk-up?
I don't know, the definition, but I guess based off of the department's definitions, it's a 2-story.
And I just noticed on page 9, I think your comment was it was based on the actuals,
Yes.
but on page 9, the net income is 111,009,
Yeah.
and you said your NOI was 112,700.
Yeah. That's using, I guess, some average expenses, not just from 2017.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Neufeld, we shall return to your properties. You have been previously sworn in, so we'll just continue on. The property we'll deal with will be 59 Evanson. So when you're ready, Mr. Assessor, we'll hear from you, please.
The subject property is 59 Evanston. The roll number is 120-821-16000. It's a residential apartment block that's 3 stories high. It was built in 1913, but we have an effective year built in 1968. There are 13 suites with no outdoor parking. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $700 to get a potential income of $117,000. We use a 2.6% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $114,000. And we use the 49% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $57,000. Capped at 5.1%, we have an estimated market value of $1,134,000, which is $81,000 per unit. On page 4 are our rent comparables, and the rents we've used are in line with what's on the market. On page 5 is a summary of the income and expenses submitted by the owner. We stabilized their operating income to be about $67,000, which is $10,000 higher than what the model has estimated at $57,000. On page 6 and 7 is information on how we derived our cap rates and some cap rate sales. On page 9 is a picture of the subject property with its location. Page 10 is some information on the subject property. The remainder of the brief are the income statement submitted by the owner. So their actual performance is about 10,000 higher than what the model has estimated, so I think it supports the model. And I ask that you maintain the assessment at $1,134,000.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, questions for the assessor?
Thank you. Page 3, was this valuation done by model? All parts?
At least so, yes.
And is this based on a year of 1968?
Yes,
Or the building was built in 1913, correct?
correct.
Now, how did it become 1968?
Usually we make adjustments in effective year built for renovations.
And when and what renovations were performed?
I believe it was windows, electrical, plumbing in maybe 2007.
Okay. And what was the nature of the electrical? I'm asking you a question that a previous assessor has provided, so I'm assuming you have the answer.
The nature of the electrical.
Yes. to install baseboards? Baseboard heaters?
I believe so, yes.
And were any renovations conducted to the frame, the foundation, or the building envelope other than the windows?
I don't believe so.
Are the windows, electrical baseboards, and plumbing deemed to be adequate enough to change an effective age by the degree indicated here, 55 years? In
It
your
was-
opinion?
Potentially.
Have you inspected?
No.
I was told yesterday by an assessor that for buildings built before 1946, that the model indicated a cap rate of 6.6%. Is that correct?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
What information do you know about your age divisions for cap rates?
I guess the one I'm most familiar with is 1974 and 75. There would be a different change in cap rate.
74, 75. Do you know what that is?
It depends on the property. It's not just one cap rate going from another cap rate. It could be multiple cap rates going to multiple other cap rates.
Okay, but as a general rule, and I know, I can ask this as a question, but it's going to be introduced later in evidence. There's a property coming up, 1944, where the parameter plot's 6.6%. So you prepared that document, I believe. So is it fair to say that in and around that period, before it is 6.6% by your model, and after is a different number?
Potentially.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Therian, questions? The assessor.
I have no questions.
Ms. McFadden.
I have a question.
Just on the age variant, it was done in 2007. Do you know whether it was a calculated age variant or just an observed age that was applied to the property?
Sorry, what is the difference? The
A
terms.
calculated,
I don't know what the terms mean.
a calculated age variant would be a percentage of new work versus percentage of existing work.
Okay. Okay, so percentage, okay.
So I'm just saying. is
And
that-
then, and observed would be someone went out and said, I noticed this, okay. And this.
Well, I don't want to put words in the assessor's
No, I know,
mouth.
and I'm not trying to, I've had enough trouble today, I just wanted to know where the words came from. Is that something that's used in the assessment department? Because I haven't heard this before.
Be better for me to put that as a question to the assessor then.
Okay.
Mr. Wong, are you aware of that terminology? Whether an age variant can be done in either manner?
I believe the effective age is an opinion based by the assessor reviewing the property.
In this particular instance,
Yes.
but I
I
guess.
don't, it doesn't appear to be, it just appears to be the opinion of the person who reviewed the property.
Okay, and I guess my follow-up would be, are you aware of any properties where there are calculated age variants?
I think I don't know. It's usually.
And I'm not talking about any specifically, but
Yeah.
if you're aware that that's a method that could be employed?
Yes, it can be employed that way.
Thank you. And your cap rate, although age is one of the factors, are there not other factors involved in that cap rate? The distinction between one cap rate applied to the next?
Yeah, a location
Location would be one as well?
Would play into it, yes.
Does the size of the property come into play too?
Yes, it does. The smaller properties the cap rates are fairly low, and larger properties are higher.
Are there any other factors, or are those the three
As far as I know,
significant?
those are the factors.
I have a follow-up question.
Please.
So, based on that discussion, we looked at 510 Brunel, which had a date of 1969, and it had 5.3. This one is 1968.
Yep.
Effective age, 5.1, very similar location. So that variance would be mostly 5. Although I guess Brunel, the one on Brunel is north of Portage and this one's south of Portage, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have to look at the
Location.
details. I would have to look at the details of the properties in order to give you an answer. Unfortunately, I can't give you an
Okay.
answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, we'll hear from you,
I
please.
do have two follow-up questions based on your questions.
Okay.
You said it was done by an assessor's decision. Do you know when and who that assessor was?
Yes, I do. It was in 2007, and I'm not sure if it's relevant. Is it?
Well, what does it matter? It's just a question. You don't get,
I think we could be fine just with it was an assessor in that section of the department.
my question is relevant then. I had a discussion with an assessor on this property in and around the time this was done, so I want to know if it was the same person. Because there may be different versions of the story.
Perhaps you could pose the question if it is that particular assessor.
Thank you. Was this Tammy Manshore?
I'm not sure how it relates to the information that was provided. It was a colleague that.
Was it yes or no? Was it Tammy? And I believe she had 3 last names during her tenure at the assessment department.
Well, I'm not sure how relevant it is. I'm going to maybe ask the panel as to if
I guess
to
perhaps.
provide some guidance, I guess.
Well, I
Yeah.
certainly don't want to put words in your mouth,
Yeah.
but I guess it could be that, is it your opinion that certain assessors would perhaps observe properties differently? Sorry, is that the gist of where you're going with this?
I can't tell you where I'm going with it.
Okay.
It wouldn't be fair,
Okay.
but I think I'm sure that.
I'm
you
just
find-
trying to get to the.
I mean, if you'd like to make
Where
some
we are.
comments about the property,
No,
you
no,
can.
no, I think that my question is pertinent, fair, and relevant, and if the assessor
Yeah.
doesn't have the right to evade a question, he may answer yes, no, don't know, or I refuse to answer. And
And essentially, I think that's what we're hearing is the latter.
Thanks for the option.
well, then I would ask the board to please give this the weight that when an assessor is being evasive on something, that they haven't done their job properly in the burden of proof. Thank you. My next part of that question is, do you have a value of the permits?
do not have the permits.
Thank you.
Those are your follow-ups?
Yes.
Okay, then we'll hear from you then, please.
Thank you. I inspected and appraised this property right after the renovation. Well, very timely, I was on the scene. And the permit cost was $100,000 for the work that was done. Very, very minor. And at the time this was done, I dealt with Tammy, who provided this information, and my questions, I have my notes here, I asked my typical question, have you inspected, and the answer was no. So I'm concerned that if the assessor doesn't want to state who this person is, if it were the person I mentioned, and he said it was based on their opinion and they hadn't inspected it, that makes their position very weak on the concept of how big the costs were. Again, makes it very weak. At the time the property, this debate came up, the property was assessed at $802,000 for $100,000 in permits, which is 12.5% of the indicated value. Very, very minor. Certainly doesn't merit a change in the variant age. More so with what was done. I inspected it, envelope, except for the windows, remained the same. The old boiler was ripped out and replaced with baseboards. It was at the end of its life, plus the owner wanted to turn over costs to the tenants with the separate meters. And they had to repair some old lead plumbing and with modern plumbing because they were taking out a permit and that was part of the code. Nothing on foundation, nothing on framing, nothing else on the envelope. Very inexpensive. Now, the actual statements of this are on page 1, and the repair and maintenance on this property are fairly inconsistent, and we have the opportunity of going back 12 years on these, and in the last 3 years it's been fairly good. But there are two issues. There were higher costs in previous years, and the current owner, not the renovating owner, the current owner is a contractor. So he does the repairs in-house. As a result, they're under indicated. As a result, we tend to agree with the assessor's value on it, and although we might differ a bit on the income side, but we also know that the expenses are higher than indicated. So we are relying on the $57,824 as an NOI, and then therefore the major only difference are the capitalization rate. We are very much aware that 1946, based on an assessor under oath yesterday, stating that all properties with an age before 1946 are at 6.6%, regardless of location. His words, not mine. That's all I know. I would certainly love if the transparency that's expected out of us in discussing our cap rates were extended to the assessor so that we could see these issues and standards and understand them. For all we know, they might have some value to them. They might have some, we may be able to rely on them. But, you know, again, we're dealing with a mystery. The burden of proof is on the assessor. They don't give you their cap rate workout, ever. Well, what's so hard about that? I mean, it is the property owner's right to know how their property was appraised, not the number, but how it was done. Now, for looking at a higher cap rate, generally properties like this don't get traded on the investment market that actively because they're not deemed to be the best investments. You're more likely to see late 50s apartments, and after that of more interest in the investment market, because most investors don't even want to bother with the old apartments. It would be a local level investor, which automatically cuts a large part of the capital, of the investment capital, out of the equation. And companies like ours don't even deal with properties like this. Most major real estate companies don't. And as a result, the information is less available. We do have a number of cap rate sales, but nothing like this. Oh, sorry, I take that back. On page 34, and I don't have permission from the owner of this copyright to reproduce anything except the calculation of the cap. And I'm inhibited by copyright law just as much as the assessor should be. So when I get something, I make sure I have permission. So I had a Fort Rouge building sold in the first quarter of 2016, built in 1912, renovated 6.99%. Another one in Wolseley, which would be where this one would be, this is the neighborhood, 7.79%, built in 1929. And the renovations in this case were unit upgrades. And I believe offloading of utilities as well. Those are the two market ones that we were looking at. And looking at the property and comparing it to, say, a prime property, the issues are, first of all, this is in R2 zoning, so the building doesn't have parking. Sorry, I have to go from memory. I think there might be a stall or two at the back. I have to think about that. It was 12 years since I was in there. But certainly it doesn't have 14 stalls. Now, it's a legal non-conforming parking use. The concept of having no parking is that you're limiting who you can rent to. It doesn't matter how socially correct we're all supposed to be. People are still going to drive. So that is a bad thing. And again, another of the reasons that major real estate firms don't tend to like to market these properties. They like to market properties where there aren't issues like parking, because it's not an attractive investment. The layout, it's all one bedrooms. It's usually a mix is preferred. A year build, of course. Quality and condition. Even on my inspection, what was done to the property didn't make it a brand new unit. It was just an offloading of the utilities. It was their basic objective, and then windows for thermal improvement. All to do with improving the value or reducing the expenses. The other issue with the small size is the question of liability to cost. And the last property we discussed, we told you about a roof repair that was $118,000. If you have a bill for $100,000 and you have to split it between 30 units, or you have to split it between 14 units, the risk level is much lower the larger your units are. And so any time we're dealing with fixed costs, the unit count higher is better for your NOI. Every apartment has 2 doors. Replacing a door costs more per unit on a smaller property. Accounting, issues like that. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Wong, questions for the applicant?
You said you appraised the property?
Yes, I did.
What is the appraised value?
It's protected. I can't tell you. I don't have permission from the owner to disclose that, and I wouldn't disclose it regardless, because it was done for a different purpose and function.
So the actual income is about $66,000 according to your calculations, but you're stabilizing, you're using $57,000?
Well, as I mentioned, the owner is the construction company. So most of the repairs work, maintenance work is done through their own company. So it's a question of the costs are gonna be in his company or they're gonna be in the apartment. So it's just not reliable. And so the actual indicated here is an unreliable actual.
So you're saying the assessment department income and expenses are reliable, but the cap rate is not reliable?
Well, you developed a model which we had the opportunity to review and then compare it to actual and knowing what the history of the property. You have to respect the fact that we're not taking very quick looks at these, and if we were, I would tell you the truth. We go out and look at the properties, inspect them, and have full access to the owners and the vendors and purchasers if it's required, and financials, and this was a known fact. So to represent the fact that we know to be incorrect would be improper. We're telling you the truth. We know it's not appropriate for valuation. And because it's doesn't meet the test of market value.
That'll be all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Thurman?
You mentioned that you inspected this property, but did you not say 12 years ago?
Right as the renovations happened, and when they were just about complete, yes.
So you haven't been in there since
No.
12 years?
No.
Okay, and you referred to 802,000 as an assessment?
Yes.
What year was that?
2012.
2012, based on 2010? Is that what it is?
That's a good question.
I think that's April 1st, 2010.
Is
Yeah,
that-
well, that's what I'm trying to,
Yep.
so that's what that is, okay? Thank
Yes,
you.
you're correct, 2010.
Okay, so my colleagues are on it. Now, yeah, we hear quite often that people want to use actuals, and I think the assessor touched on this, and then you've deferred to the stabilized, to the cities in Hawaii, so wonder if, why you did not stick to the actuals. I know you've mentioned that, but I'm sort of intrigued because I'm looking at 3 years here, like 15, 16, 17, and they're all higher than the cities in Hawaii.
The reasoning is that, I just got here in my notes, I did state it, was that the owner is a construction company and perform the repairs without charging the property, and they're reflected in another statement.
Which brings me back to the permit cost of 100,000. It may not be reliable if the contract, just to follow up on what you're saying, in other words, the contractor might have made $150,000 worth of upgrades, because you're saying the owners of the construction companies doing all kinds of stuff, so maybe that permit was low in
Yes,
relation
but-
to what was done.
With all due respect, I did address that earlier, different owner.
Oh, different order? Okay, I missed that.
And you get me on most stuff.
No, that's okay. I try to pick up everything I said. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden?
So the renovation happened in 2007, is that what you're saying, 12 years ago?
That's when I had it as complete,
It's
yes.
100,000.
Yeah.
And when, and this is a question for the assessor, when was the age changed
At that time.
at that time?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I have no questions. Desire for summation on this property?
Brief.
Oh,
Nothing there? The essential to this argument is the concept of effective age, and I have to be careful because I did overhear a conversation earlier, but as we all get older, and we need to replace our body parts with different parts, It doesn't make us younger. It extends our life. It extends the pleasure we have in our life, but it doesn't make us younger. And it's the same with buildings.
Thank you. We'll move on to 185 Bond Street. When you're ready, please, Mr. Assessor.
Subject property is 185 Bond. The roll number is 120-937-15000. It's a residential apartment that's 3 stories high. It was built in 1928. We have an effective year built in 1944. There are 29 suites with 5 outdoor parking spaces. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We used average rents of $654 to get a potential income of $227,000. We used a 3% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $221,000. And we used a 51% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $107,000. Capped at 6.6%, we have an estimated market value of $1,623,000, which is $55,000 per unit. On page 4 are our rent comparables, and the rents we used are in line with what's on the market. On page 5 is a summary of the income and expenses submitted by the owner. Their income and expenses indicate a stabilized net operating income of $105,000, which is in line with what the model is estimated at $107,000. On page 6 and 7 is information on how we derived our cap rates and some cap rate sales. Page 9 is a picture of the subject property with its location. On page 10 is an advertisement for the property. It indicates that there have been some renovations and the building's upgraded. The remaining pages are the income statements provided by the owner. So their actual operating income is about $105,000, which is in line with what the model is estimated at $107,000. So it supports the model, and I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $1,623,000.
Thank you. Mr. Info, questions?
Have you inspected this property?
I've not.
This one shows an effective year of 1944, changed from 1928. When did that happen, and what was the reason?
be about 2013, and it was for renovation work that was done.
And can you confirm which assessor made those changes? Did you yourself make them?
No, a colleague did.
You're the first one, though, who represented this property post-renovation, did you not?
Potentially.
2016. What was the scope of the renovations?
I have some information that says like concrete floors and walls, security entrance, water, electrical lines, hardwoods, refinished hardwoods, bathroom, kitchen, new washrooms, new appliances, common areas.
So, what can you tell us about the concrete floors? Do you know anything?
No.
Looking at the scope of renovations you just described, how do they compare to the previous property we discussed?
They might be similar.
Page 3, is this all from the model?
I believe so, yes.
Does your model provide any differentiation based on unit type?
I'm not sure. I don't believe so.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Therian?
Yeah, well, I was looking at the mailer for, on page 11, and, 'cause I know I asked those questions previously, so.
Yep.
So then you're using an average, well, it's the model.
Yeah.
The model brings out, because the income is 220 on page 11, and you're using 227 or 228.
Yeah.
I'm just not getting into the hundreds there. Now, is there anything on the expense side that is improper in your view on page 11?
It doesn't appear so.
No?
It,
Okay. Now, also on your, so it appears to be okay, that page on page 11?
yeah.
Okay. Now, on your page 10, this is dated the 18th of March 2019.
Yes.
Now, I know we have to look at the thing in its present physical condition,
Yes.
but do we know when the upgrades were done?
I would say it was done in about 2014.
Well, that far
around,
back?
around there.
Because we don't have any indication of the permits.
No.
So, and I see on page 15, now, I'm trying to tie these together, on page 15, oh, that's 2015. You're showing 103,015 at the bottom for 185 Vaughan,
Yes.
but that's 15, okay.
Yes.
And this one, you're using the 6.6 cap. Okay, I think that's all I had for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden?
Mr. Wong, you mentioned that you felt that the renovations that were made to this may have been similar to what was made in the previous building. However, in this case, the effective date moved not even 20 years, 16 years, and in the last building, the effective date was 55 years.
Yeah.
Can you leave out any explanation for that?
No. Just that depending on the assessor that reviewed the property, they may have determined a different age, effective age.
know, certainly looking at the picture, and we didn't have any pictures of the last one, but looking at this picture, bringing this to a 1944 age, it seems like a very large discrepancy. Would you not agree?
It would potentially require some review.
Okay, thank you. That's all my
But,
questions.
Have no questions. Okay. Mr. Neufeld?
Just some comments, which can be deemed as rebuttal in the assessor's information. Please note page 15, year end is May 3rd, 2015, that's the fiscal year end. On page 5, where the assessor has recreated a expense roll, income and expense roll, the year of 2015 was still representing a renovation year. So the two issues in that case are the income, as you can see, is substantially lower, reflecting an absorption, and the expenses are also substantially lower, reflecting repairs, renovations completed already, and fewer tenants in the site. So that's inappropriate to use in this comparison. Moving on to our presentation.
Sorry, if that was meant to be rebuttal.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The assessor should have an opportunity to comment on that.
And I should also comment that the renovations were occurring at the time, had begun to occur at the time of December 2013, and it was fairly extensive, so they weren't completed for several months. So the statement you're looking at represents a time period when the building was down for repairs and renovation.
Which period? Which period are you for that it was down?
The information is, I remember this because I had contacted the owner in and around December 2013, and he told me that they were under renovation at the time. And
what does that have to do with the 2015 and 16 information?
well, the 2015 statement covers the period of June 14 to May 15.
Okay.
So he was still reabsorbing back in the market or finishing his construction. So it was a partial year, and as such, you can see it's evident that the statements that the income is substantially lower than prior years. That's proof that it was under work. Also, yeah, okay. And therefore, the expenses are going to be lower for a lower human load, and also that your repair costs after a renovation are typically very, very low.
Okay.
That was your only concern with his rebuttal?
Yeah, I wasn't sure
Yeah.
what, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess I wouldn't have used a 3-year period for stabilizing. I would have used a shorter period, that's all.
Yeah, the 2011 is indicating, I guess, a net income of 95,000, and the 2016 is indicating a net income of about 108,000. And you know, it might not be exactly in line with the model, but it is the model is reasonably close.
Okay, Mr. Neufeld,
Yeah,
please.
So what we've done is knowing that the history of the building, we've only used the 2 years of revenue and expenses, and we were well aware of 2015 being a partial year. The building, the scope of work, my client, I'm very much aware he had to repair his floors. And he ended up pouring a new concrete deck floor in his block, because that's where it felt that was required to, it was old. This is a change of a major amount relating to the framing of the property. You know, we always look at the essentials, the foundation, the framing, the envelope, and major. And in this case, the varying age differed very slightly. It was a greater scope of work than was done for the previous property. So there are some inconsistencies in the assessor's approach to doing this, and I would suggest they tend to be based on desk observations rather than street observations. Now, the actual vacancy, by the time they had done their lease up after their work, was 6%, and that's in 2016. And the vacancy drifted higher in the, sorry, I did my math wrong, I read the wrong number, 11%. The potential income in 2016 was 266,000, performance was 236,000. I'm just looking for the same number for the next year. Now, I do not have potential, but the actual dropped another $20,000, which I'm assuming that the potential was the same, and on that basis, the vacancy was 18% in 2017. Now, this is a market issue, not a building issue. The reason why is it's got 21 bachelor suites and 8 one-bedroom suites, and its location is on Vaughan. I believe that's just south of the bay. I heard yesterday the bay's worth nothing.
Yeah, you must have let that in.
Oh, you bet you're gonna hear that in the future.
Or 10.8.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. I asked how that got in the news, and someone said, well, you should go. So what we did, looking at the stabilizing, the expenses were consistent at 125, 128,000. So they're very reliable. The revenue being subject to the vacancy made this property a bit of a difficulty, because is this just one bad year? Because the building has a short performance history in its current condition, we don't know. And so one could speculate it's going to rebound, or perhaps you could suggest that we should average them out. They might have another year, but we don't know that. So I chose not to. I chose to rely on the performance, because I can't prove that something's going to get better. The only proof I have here is that it got worse. And that's why we're using 93,000. And an alternate view of that would be to average the income off, which gets you an NOI of about 101,000 on a typical valuation, still under what the assessor has. And as far as the cap is concerned, we again put 7.25 on it. Obviously, the bachelor units are likely a big problem. A very low interest in having bachelor suites. It's got a better suite count, but the bachelor unit generally, bachelor pads end up in the downtown area degenerating to social assistance housing, and this wasn't intended to be social assistance housing. But that's the unfortunate reality of the bachelor market segment. The parking is a non-factor, because this is downtown, and most of the blocks downtown don't have parking, so therefore that should be reflected as a location disadvantage rather than, or a location factor rather than a parking factor. And for the please note our earlier discussion. Capitalization rate by the model is 6.6% based on their year applied of 1944, which is consistent with what I was told yesterday. So the difference between 6.6 and 7.25 is worth considering, and also the actual performance. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Wong, questions for the applicant?
Did you prepare this brief?
No.
That would be all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Therian?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. McFadden?
Mr. Wong, the cap rate, I'm sorry, can I redirect to that? I know I'm supposed to ask any question.
But you do have a redirect, and
Yes.
it's going to follow up with a question there?
Yes.
Please
Is
proceed.
it going to follow up with a question for him?
Right. Well, no, okay. Go ahead, redirect.
Okay, I'll ask my question of Rocky first.
You can ask of Mr. Wong.
Thank you, sorry.
Yep.
Just something I remembered. I just wanted to check on the cap rate, the 6.6 cap rate. And that's related, I assume, to the age. Can you, or are you able to confirm that location does not play into that, or that it does play into that?
I can't say for sure off the top of my head. I would have to check.
Okay, thank you.
So now you have questions for,
I don't have any questions for the,
just clarifications. Mr. Neufeld, you said you used the 2 years. Why did you exclude the 2015?
It was a part year.
It was only a part year?
Yes.
But
You note the assessor's page 5, the income is $40,000 lower. And that was during the first part of that, his statement period, June to May. So during the first part of it, it was either construction finishing or absorbing. So the greatest cost in repairs and maintenance is turnover. What do you do to a suite when it's vacated? So they had no turnover the first year. They didn't have to refurbish anyone's suite or spend any money on it. They just moved in. And that's why your expenses are going to be lower too first year.
okay, thank you. Mr. Wong, desire for summation on this property?
No.
Mr. Neufeld?
No.
Thank you. Bring us to 45 Carlton. When you're ready, Mr. Assessor.
The subject property is 45 Carlton. The roll number is 120-926-08000. It's a residential apartment block that's 3 stories high. It's built in 1928 and has 30 suites with no outdoor parking stalls. On page 2 are sales history for the subject property. It sold in 2016 for $2,250,000. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We used a reference of $640 to get a potential income of $230,000. Used a 3% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $223,000. Used a 59% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $91,000. Capped at 6.6% with an estimated market value of $1,385,000, which is about $46,000 per unit. On page 4 are rent comparables, showing the rents reviews online with what's on the market. Page 5 and 6 is information on how we derive our cap rates and some cap rate sales. Page 8 Winnipeg property with its location. Page 9 is information on the property with its current condition. Page 10 is the 2017 income statement. You'll note on the bottom of page 11, they have a total rehabilitation expenditure of $1,132,000 for 2017.
Sorry, what page was that?
Page 11.
Sorry, fine. Okay, right.
So we have a sale price of about $2,250,000 and over $1 million in renovation costs. Appears that the assessed value is under assessed right now, but for now I have to maintain the assessed value of $1,385,000.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, questions?
Yes, you had mentioned, referred to renovation costs dating from 2017, and your reference date is 18 and your fiscal date is 20. Why was the actual year, effective year, it's still the same though, correct?
Yes.
And page 2, did you research to see if that was part of a larger portfolio?
I did not.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Theron?
Yeah, I just try to make sense of this, of all these numbers. But on page 13, I see at the bottom of the page on the rent roll, the income is $227.40. You all got that? But I see that the vacancy is already taken off. So I guess if I compare that to your, I assume, model on page 3,
Yeah.
so $227.40 versus $223,544, which is the effective gross income after taking off your vacancy.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that the statement justifies the, I guess, is that correct? Have I missed anything in trying to?
It's just like the numbers of the rents in December are say $875 and $1,000.
On that page?
Yeah, on page 13, right?
875, I don't see that.
Yeah, like $973, $874, $1,081.
Yeah, it's November, I'm looking
Yeah.
at December.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you go to January, you'll see that there are some zeros and some
Yeah,
459.
oh,
So
okay.
basically, that was the year
Okay.
that there was they were in between. They were in between vacant and old rents versus renovated and new rents.
Okay. So that seems to be a pretty good indication of what the income was. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, yeah,
On
this
the
is-
expense side, well, I didn't know what to look at.
Yeah, the
Quite frankly.
220 is kind of a blended year with like vacant, old rents, and also occupied and new rents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, seems to make sense. 2740.
I checked with these, yes.
Okay. So you're submitting this now, Mr.
Yeah, I haven't I didn't review this,
No.
and this is my first chance to look at it, but work was kind of crazy. So my apologies.
Am I out of line, sir?
Well, we've just got to withdraw
I
form on this.
I didn't want to
particular
hear
property.
you keep talking, so I wanted
Oh,
to figure out.
I'm sorry.
Cut you
I
off.
was just trying to,
He's
I was
supposed to-
listening to Mr. Wong, so,
Mhm.
sorry, Mr. Chairman, I missed that.
No, not a problem, it just arose now. So at this point, there's really no sense in continuing further with any questions.
Agree?
So we will have dealt with this property by withdrawal. Are you writing up any other, Mr. Nicole?
No, this is a new property, pretty much for us, and it was on our portfolio list, and the owner said, please file these, and
Okay,
our staff did a evaluation. I agree with the number, but, you know, it hasn't been absorbed yet, so obviously.
okay, then we will move on to 380 Assiniboine when you're ready. Mr. Chesson.
The subject property is 380 Assiniboine. The roll number is 120927, 12000. It's a residential apartment block that's 3 stories high, built in 1931, and has 44 suites with 9 outdoor parking stalls. Go to page 3 is our income valuation summary.
Sorry, I'm not trying to apologize for interrupting, but there is a recommendation here, is that correct?
Yes.
So, we had to get approval from the owner, so we're going to accept it.
Okay.
So what is the recommendation on this property,
The recommendation is on the front page.
right?
Yeah, it's $2,789,000.
Right, and that's
Here,
based
for
on the
future
revised
verification.
workup that you provided?
Yep.
I just confirmed that was a cap rate of 6.6%, right?
So is accepted
Okay,
this?
so that's your recommended value, $2,789,000, and you're in agreement with that, Mr.
Yes.
Nicole? Any questions or concerns from the panel?
No, thank you for me.
So nothing further from you then, Mr. Nicole? Thank you.
Just racing right along here. Yep.
Here's a little slower to blocks. No. So when you're ready, Mr. Assessor, we'll hear from you regarding 303 Assiniboine, please.
Subject property is 303 Assiniboine. The roll number is 120-925-181-00. It's a residential apartment block that's 3 stories high, built in 1929, and has 34 suites. It has 34 suites with 0 outdoor parking. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We used average rents of $768 to get a potential income of $313,000. We used a 3% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $303,000. And we used a 51% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $147,000. Capped at 6.6%, we have an estimated market value of $2,232,000, which is $65,000 per unit. On page 4 are rent comparables. Page 5 and 6 is information on how we derive our cap rates and some cap rate sales. On page 8 property with its location. Page 9 is some information on the subject property. Their income for 2017 is about $149,000, and it supports the model at which estimated operating income of about $147,000. The actual performance supports the model, and I asked you to maintain the assessed value at $2,232,000.
Thank you. Newfield, questions for the assessor?
Have you inspected?
Not.
And the work of page 3, was this done by the model?
I believe so.
In previous years, there were overrides to this model. Did you happen to note them in your review of the property?
No.
Specifically, the expense ratio and the income had been modified from the model
Okay.
2 years ago.
Okay.
The reasoning being the assessor provided was that the model was incorrect and did not properly reflect the subject. But you didn't make a change this year? Okay. And sorry, in other of your briefs, you had actually done a workup of the actuals here. You didn't do it for this particular case?
No.
And in your investigation of this, did you, other than looking at whether or not the models changed, did you determine any irregularities, or not irregularities, any issues related to the parking income? Because you mentioned that there's no parking on the site, right?
Yeah.
So did you investigate further on the parking issues? The adjacent, pertaining to the adjacent lot.
Pertaining to the adjacent lot, I know that it was there. It was. It might be used for this property.
Okay. You know it might be used. Okay. And did you look up the mailer for that lot? Any chance?
No.
I don't know if this is a rebuttal. It has
Well, I mean, if you have information to present on the property, you can present it.
Yeah, no, I know. I just, and this is just the expense form on the lot. If you don't have it in your file, I'll present it at one point.
You can present it in your presentation.
Okay, so, but you have no knowledge of the parking. Okay, those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Thurden?
Yeah, page 3, potential gross rent is 31313, and the mailer as to on page 10 as 274,935, which is a substantial difference. On the other hand, because I'm looking at the mailers to see what they mean here, They've got expenses of $125,000 on page 10 for a net of $150,000. You've stated that this sort of justifies the NOI at 147,333. But then if I look at the previous year on the mailer, which is page 13, the expenses were $152 on an income of about $264. So they seem to be about 152 to 125. It's about $27,000 lower in this cycle. Now, I haven't analyzed anything here, but it seems that the income based on the mailer or the mailers is high. Would you like to comment on that?
The income, the model's income.
The gross potential rent on page 3 is 313. The mailer says on page 10 says 275.
Yep.
And the previous year says 264.
Yep.
So the question begs, is the model out of whack here or what?
I would say that the model might be estimating high, but like when you look at their page 12,
Yeah, but that's potential rent.
Yeah.
It's not the actual income.
yeah,
If you read that, that's
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
if it was all rented.
the actual income, they say maybe 274,000.
Yeah.
But like we're trying to estimate the operating income, and when you look at the operating income, like sometimes our rents might be high, but we might be a little bit we might have overestimated their expenses, and so but if in the end the NOI is similar, then I believe it supports the model, or that's what it boils down to.
No.
And it's because it's a model, it's not going to be exact. And
No, I know that,
Yeah.
but looking at the income, I don't want to belabor the point. Looking at the income, you're 40,000 higher by the model. Now, is the model, that's all modeled on page 3?
I believe
And
so,
not
yes.
modified in any way?
I don't believe so.
Okay, that's all, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Ms.
What?
McFadden.
Well, I would just go a little further to that
Yeah, go
point.
ahead.
For the in 2017, we've got a net operating income being reported of 150, close to 150. In 2016, the net operating income is 111.
Yes.
And you're saying that you've done no investigation for why there is that discrepancy. There's been no, you've made no attempt to stabilize this at all. You've just gone with the model and telling us that it's supported by the 2017 numbers.
The 2017 does support it. The 2016 supports an NOI that is a little bit lower.
Quite a bit lower.
Yeah. It's the fluctuation in the repair and maintenance. It's difficult for us to investigate all those exactly, I guess, for every property. And so like when we look at the overall information that we have, I mean, is the model potentially a little bit high? Potentially yes, but it's still, I feel it's within the range of what the value could be.
Okay, and my second question relates to the parking. If we look at the ad that is provided here, page 9, it very clearly says parking available $42 per month, which would imply that this property owner has control of other property to provide parking if there's no parking on this site. Would you agree?
Possibly, yes. Yeah, I believe that there is a lot next door that is used.
In which case, in most circumstances, that's considered part of the same, when we're looking at assessments, that's usually considered part of the same unit. the same in most cases?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I looked into whether there was parking income or not, and it doesn't seem to claim any parking income on this particular income and expense. And the attributes that we have for this property, we don't have any parking attributed to the property. And so, as far as I know, everything that we have is without parking.
The property owner could be paying a lease to another property owner though, is that possible?
I think they own, they probably own the
other
two.
one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you, that's my question.
I'd like to follow that up. Parking available at an adjacent parking lot. Do you know whether that's for the exclusive use of this property, or is it available to the public?
Actually, I do not know.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a follow-up question? No? No? Then we'll hear from you, please.
I think this qualifies as rebuttal since we managed to talk about parking. Yeah.
Thanks.
I can deal with it as it is that the question asked of the assessor was how the parking was done, and this shows you that it's the same owner, Gopher Enterprises, owns the block and the parking lot immediately north of the building, and it says here that the revenue is included in the statements for 36 Navy Way and 303 Assembly. So the two lots share the parking. The bulk of it is shared by 303 Assembly because 36 Navy has a small lot of its own. So within the statement, and we've been through this already on the assessor's attempts to request a penalty. This is what they have. They don't have it broken down separately. I've gone up and inspected the site. The electrical for the parking lot comes out of the building at 303 Assembly. They don't have a separate meter. The only thing they could potentially provide the assessor with is information they already know, which is the assessed value and the taxes. It's a scramble sort of thing where someone from 36 Navy or 303 Assembly wants a lot, and then they find a spot for him or her in either the 36 Navy lot or the 0 Navy lot, and then now for years they've in their statements they've included in their statement the breakdown in the parking income, and after the issue from a few years ago, they were very reluctant to fill the form out with anything that would no, I'm sorry, I take that back. They've actually declared it right here on page 12 of the assessor's brief. Parking income 6480. So none of that is for the subject. All of that is for the property next door. So our issue is either subtract the 6480 or have less expenses, or the simplest way was just to subtract the assessment from the overall. Now, 36 Navy was heard yesterday, and we did not subtract a lot, so we're definitely not trying to double dip. And that was because, as I mentioned, 36 Navy has its own lot, but the back and forth between the two properties is like it's not. There's no details on it. There's no statements on it. They'll say who was parking here when. It's like you get assigned this lot, you pay your landlord for the building you're in. because it's all one owner. Gopher also owns 36 Navy. And on page 2, the overhead, the red dot is on Assiniboine, 303 Assiniboine. The lot up to and including the row on the first fence where the parking is, that's a separate title. And then the parking from that row northwards and the other building is all 36 Navy. And we should have drawn lot lines on this, just for clarity. So what we did
Where's
is,
the picture we're looking at? Sorry.
Page
On
2 of
his,
this agreement.
on brief, which we have.
yeah, I can
What?
draw them
Page
on
2 of
them and
his.
show if that helps, if it's confusing at all, where the lot lines are.
So the parking lot we're talking about is to the west of the subject
No,
property?
no, west is entirely separate.
If you look at, take a look on my page 8.
Oh, you got it? Good. No, that doesn't help. Oh, well, yeah, it somewhat helps, because where he has 364,000 listed, that line extends for the first row, first 2 rows of parking.
Oh,
And the other one marked 792,000 is some stranger's lot. Incidentally, the cutout on that lot, on the lot line, is city property, because the requirement is for a maneuvering lane for city vehicles.
so essentially the parking lot is to the north of the subject property?
Yeah, I've drawn it on this. I think the assessment is pretty good, but you don't have an issue with this, do you? If that's how I've drawn it?
Right there.
Got it.
So 36 Navy has this,
Right.
this one, and that's 36 Navy.
Now, they did this, I think they built this building, the family, in 1929, so it's the way they wanted to do it back then, and it hasn't changed. With the calculation of our NOI, fairly standard. Take a look at the revenue, and there has been revenue growth, fairly consistent revenue growth. I'm looking at the last 10 years here. It's always gone up every year, roughly by the amount of RTB allowance. You'll note that from 15 to 16 there was no increase, and that was just a market vacancy. And then the increase kicked in, or the amount of the increase sort of like doubled up when you hit 2017. The expenses vary dramatically. Historically, they have fluctuated from 240,000 to a low of 112,000 on expenses, and the 240, we have not made adjustments. There was no carry forward. It was a one-time expense that I believe it was a window year, and we never amortized that in any way whatsoever. We did discount it. We called it a capital expense and took it out of our statements in 2000, the year it occurred, 2013. The expenses that year were 232,000, and we reduced those. So there's no hangover effect, there's no adjustments like you've seen earlier. But there is a fluctuation, and the NOI has varied over that period from 16,000 as a low to a high in 2017, and it's all due to variable expense load. The 1929 building will run you problems every so often, every year almost. Their 2 most stable years of operation were 2011 and 2012, where the expenses were only 112,000 per year. And that's a low year, but of course it gets followed up by a high year. And I'm very comfortable with our calculation here based on the 12 years of history I have on this property. And that I would say that the average would be 150,000, 951, and using the highest income, it gives us an NOI of 123 to 984, 7.25% cap rate, fairly not too inconsistent with the assessor at 6.6%. Our issues, again, we looked at a base rate for good property at 5.75, and the problems with this one are proximity to the bridge. It's extremely noisy, and it's right beside the Donald Street Bridge. The access has gone very strange over the last couple of years with the one-way on Assiniboine. And actually, it changes right in front of the property where Navy joins Assiniboine. The high amount of one bedrooms is a small factor. Year built, obviously, because quality and condition speak to the variations in expenses, and it's simply not enough to say I'm averaging the expenses and that cures all the problems of valuation. The concern is the uncertainty of a building that's 90 years old and its variations in expenses being unpredictable. On the investment market, they don't like that. Again, like I said earlier, investment market, you're going to see late 50s as probably your entry point on the investment market, just because the expenses are easier to predict versus properties that are older. One of the other issues that we're dealing with, or trying to understand how it's going to affect the property, is that right in front of this property, a new condominium complex was built. So I asked the owner, I said, what do you think that's going to affect you? Your river view is blocked. And jokingly, he knows all about the process. He said, well, it's better than the Board of Revision, which is where the Board of Revision used to be cited. He was joking. But there are two large projects there, and the concept of riverfront property, and you know, you look at a lot of cities where there's a slope, they try to give everybody a view. You know, you build a little bit lower, closer to your water, and then build higher behind it. Economically, I mean, for value-wise, the more river views you can sell, the more value you can create. Our planners seem to have gone with the point that if you want to build a big high building in front of the other buildings and block the river view, that's fine. And it does lead to a devaluation of a property because it's almost like being in the back lane behind the property that matters. And we haven't accounted for it, but it was just something that we had noted. That's my presentation. Oh, sorry. We subtracted the assessment of the Navy lot at $364,000, and that's to deal with the loss of the parking revenue is associated with that site.
Thank you. Mr. Long, questions?
No questions.
Mr. Thurin?
I have no questions.
No, I have no questions either.
I just have a question on this parking lot, the 364, that's the assessment, but that's attributable to the two properties,
Yes, but mostly to the subject.
and the subject has all the revenue and all the expenses.
No, the subject has the revenue that comes from the tenants in their building in the subject's revenue. So not all, if you imagine, for sake of argument, there's 30 parking spaces, 10 are owned by 36 Navy and 20 by 303 Assiniboine. Either of those two buildings' tenants can park in any of the spot. Right. And then, we attempted at one point to work out the income, the net income, and we had come to, this is a few years ago, about $4,600 ballpark, an adjustment to the NOI, and that's the other option is adjust the NOI that base.
Because I noticed that on the assessors, page 12, they've got parking of $64.80,
Right.
but we don't know what the expenses attributable to that are.
That's correct.
And do you think that's shared between the two properties as well? Like if you've got 20-30 for income,
Right.
have you got 20-30 for expenses?
Well, let me just think here, because we have 19,946 in property taxes. The taxes are not included for the parking lot in this expenses for the Assiniboine. Those expenses are all for the building itself. Electrical, we know, because it's wired into it, so the building is separately metered, so the 3538, separately metered for electricity only, it constitutes the common area in the parking lot.
Okay.
So if, you know, the point on the penalty was, you know, you either provide the information you have with, or if you try to split it up, make life easier for the assessor, you get accused of providing potentially misleading information. It's a no-win situation, so we just tell them what we have in our possession, and this is it.
And sorry, can you repeat what you said? You think the contribution to the NOI is?
About $4,700. That's an alternative,
Thank you. Mr. Wong, summation for this property? Mr. Neufeld?
Just, I know you're not looking at the previous years, but it is under appeal because for the first time in a long time, no deduction was made for the Navy lot. And it was a particularly challenging hearing.
No deduction was made for what?
For the parking lot on the 2018 assessment
So
appeal.
previous to that it happened.
But previous it had been provided.
Okay.
Last year it wasn't, and we appealed to the municipal board to have some consideration for the parking lot removed. That's why it's under appeal, and that's why that value is on the high side from last year.
And that's your summation for that property then?
Yes.
Thank you. So we'll forge ahead, and that'll bring us to the last property on our docket today, 85 Hargrave. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Assessor, we'll hear from you, please.
Do you mind if I have 1 minute just to quickly review something here?
Okay. Let's make it 5 minutes. Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order. We're going to deal with 85 Hargrave. Mr. Assessor, we'll hear from you, please.
Okay, I guess before we move on to the last property, I was just wondering, Mr. Neufeld, would you feel that Zero Navy should be merged with 303 Assiniboine?
We're amenable to that, but we want it done on a controlled basis, like when there are no outstanding appeals, and at a time when it's good for both parties. I think this particular property owner has had some surprise merges on them, which, you know, if you're paid an appeal fee and all of a sudden the city merges it on their own, it's not fair. So yeah, if we could work with a date, we would.
The subject property is 85 Hargrave. The roll number is 120-925-650-00. It's a residential apartment block that's 2 stories high. It was built in 1959, but we have an effective year built in 1974. There are 16 suites with 8 outdoor parking stalls. Page 2 is a sales history of the subject property. It sold for $1.1 million in 2015. Page 3 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $891 to get a potential income of $171,000. We use the 3% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $166,000. We use the 47% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $87,000. Kept at 5.1%, so have an estimated market value of $1,718,000, which is $107,000 per unit. On page 4 are our rent comparables, showing the rents we used are in line with what's on the market. Page 5 and 6 is information on how we derived our cap rates and some cap rate sales. Page 8 is a picture of the subject property with its location. Page 9 is some information on the subject property. Page 10 and 11 are the income statements for 2017. Their net operating income in 2017 is about $93,000, which is a bit higher than what the model is estimated at $87,000. Page 12 is the permit that was taken up for the subject property. The construction value is $695,000. Looking at what the permit being at $695,000 and their sale price of $1.1 million, that puts it the investment's at least $1,795,000, which is a little bit higher than what the model is estimated at $1,718,000. The operating income also supports the model at $1,700,000, so I asked that you maintain the assessed value at $1,718,000.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, questions?
The page 3, is this the model? Old model?
I believe so.
Did you investigate the sale to see if it was a multi-role sale?
during our sales verification process, it does appear to be an arm's length sale.
The question was, did you investigate if it was a multi-level sale?
I did not.
On page 11, their statement, line item on property taxes, did you investigate whether that represented the assessment before renovations or after renovations?
No.
On page 12, construction value, did you compare the declared construction value against their statement to you?
No.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Varian?
Was the 2016 permit, is that what affects the effective year of 1974, or that would come later?
Yes, that's, it looks like that is
Related?
Yeah,
So it would be related to the 2016 permit?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have no question.
Just on your rent comparables on page 4, I see that the average monthly rent, and this is 2 bachelors and 14 one-bedrooms in the subject. I noticed that it's higher than all your comparables, with the exception of number 4. And number 4, your suite mix is 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. So you would expect 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 50% split would be commanding higher rent than mostly 1 bedrooms and a couple of bachelors, would you not?
Yeah, yeah.
So
The,
based on that, you're still comfortable with the $891.74 model rent that was
yeah,
generated?
yeah, especially considering like their actual income. Like in terms of whether the rents are at a higher or lower, or the expenses, the operating income estimate appears to be accurate.
All right, thank you. Mr. Neufeld?
A couple of physical facts. The permit value was not achieved according to the statement submitted to the city. I have a copy of it here. The actual renovation cost was $458,133. No.
Sorry, where is that information?
It was submitted in the last year's income and expense information to the city.
No, but do you have it in here?
No, I don't. When we filed this appeal, we didn't have the financials. We didn't even have the submission to the income and expense, and so we did have access to the assessor's workup, which we applied. And that's why I'd asked for 5 minutes. I just wanted to read these statements just to review our information. And referring to the valuation on the assessor's page 10 and 11, which we didn't have in our possession, on the actuals, which indicate $93,892 as NOI. The line item for property taxes represents the value before renovation. The value, the assessment after renovation is $20,272. It's the problem with the time lag in a renovated property. You gotta, you know, if you're gonna treat it as renovated, then you gotta tax it. You have to adjust the taxes. The second issue is the maintenance and repair is $10,690, which is $668 per unit, well below what you would expect. Now, whether we adjust it or not, it just lends some support for, we're comfortable with the assessor's NOI, 87,623. That's my statement, my position on it. I didn't prepare this workup, and so this is just my own interpretation of how I would reach the value. As far as the cap rate is concerned, I want to apply a cap of 6.5% to that, which is a value of 1 million. I'm always doing this wrong, aren't I? Yes, 1,348,046 rounded to 1,348,000.
So what's that based off?
6.5% cap rather than 7. And the assessor's NOI, which upon review would fairly indicate the actual income from 2017. The revenue is a bit overstated in the assessor's side because the rent roll is actually as full. It is $153,900. That was again submitted in the last income and expense submission, and I did have that number. It was $12,825 per month, or $153,900 per year. Very consistent with the declared income on page 11. Significantly lower than the potential rent of $171,214. The actual average per unit is $801 rather than $891. Actual expense ratio is better than 47.24% to reflect a renovated state, and that's why we have gross differences in how we arrived at the number, but in the final analysis, I would arrive at a number very close to that within my own calculation. The 6.5% is based very, very strongly on my comparable on page 33. Just 2 houses down the road, 26 and 45 Hargrave. They are two 17-unit blocks, built in 1959. Renovated beginning in 2011, sold for 6.62% cap rate. Geez, if there was ever a really good one to find to compare a property, it would be this one. That is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wong, questions for the applicant?
So you were saying that you have no information on this property?
I had limited information. I had the last year's income and expense returns. I had the assessment department workup, and then we never had the 2017 statement. So
on what did you base the appeal on?
Well,
What information?
I'm an appraiser. I know it wasn't worth that much regardless.
Okay. And once again, this is your interpretation of somebody else's work?
No, I mean, I can say now that I had enough time to do a complete review and my own analysis. My own NOI would come in slightly lower NOI I'm not entirely sure I would adjust the property tax as much, because we don't know what the decision is gonna be today, so that's a moving target. But I would likely adjust them upwards by about $3,000, and then I would adjust the maintenance and repair downwards by, or upwards again, by about $6,000 to at least $1,000 a unit. And in doing so, my NOI would be approximately $85,000. And we're at 87,000. So my analysis would only be a $2,000 lower than your own, and I wouldn't have come to it. I don't think that number is worth debating, the difference.
Oh, so that your analysis was in the last 5 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, that would be all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Therian?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. McFadden?
I have no questions.
And I have no questions. So thank you. So, Mr. Wong, did you want to do a summation on this property, or one that's gonna take in general on all the properties?
Sure. I mean, I guess if you just look at the 45 Carlton sheet that I submitted.
This is part of your summation?
Oh, it was part of the whole package for the whole, for all the properties.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess the package is, I guess from Mark Thiessen at Remax, and some of the sales comparables that he's indicated he's used for the sale of 45 Carlton, which is on the docket, is indicating that values of similar properties are approximately 80,000 to 100,000 per unit, and the values that the model has estimated, they definitely fall within that range or are supported by these sales. And it's just supporting that the model's estimate of values for these types of properties are representative of market value.
Thank you. And actually, I'm not sure that was truly a summation. That's actually dealing with evidence.
I guess
that
it
was
wasn't.
presented.
I guess it wasn't a summation, but it could have been like, you know.
Right, but
afterwards.
on that point, I'm going to allow Mr. Neufeld the opportunity to question anything that you've stated there, where I don't normally in a summation, but.
Those are listings?
Pardon me?
Are those listings?
Their sales.
Okay. And in the assessment department, do you do your valuation based on income, or do you base them on sales provided by third-party realtors?
We do our assessments based off of sales.
Like this property, you're doing it off the sale?
The model is built based off of sales and income and expense information.
It's called the income approach, correct?
Yes.
Were any of Mr. Thiessen's comparables provided with the income valuation?
No.
Thank you.
Desire for a summation then?
Just a brief. Unless if that's finished, okay. No one's disputing there's a sale. I asked the question about the multi-role. This person, and actually my next door neighbor is one of his partners in this venture, and I know that they were pursuing several properties at this time, and had made multi-role sales. I wouldn't put the greatest weight on it. Also, the amount of the permit, they came in under permit. And that statement was provided by the owner to the assessment department. But of course, you're not going to base the valuation on the cost approach, a mix of the cost approach and the direct comparison approach. You're going to do it on the income approach. In this case, the income is quite clear as to where that level lies. And the only thing put to you as a dispute was a cap rate. And that cap rate, you were at least provided with a comparable, which was the same age, the same size, a few houses away. And there's not too many better ones that you're ever going to see. And just for a personal point of comment, the assessor asked about how I could do a workup in that amount of time. Once I made somebody a bet that I could do an appraisal in less than an hour, and it took 35 minutes. It's an apartment block. They're the easiest thing in the world to do. You got income, and you don't have to, after the inspection, of course. If you have the statements in front of you, they are quite easy to do. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you both gentlemen for your presentations today. And the orders will come up in due course.
Cam, you were saying that you wanted that one document to be applied for every file here today?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll need more copies. I didn't know that, so I thought it was just for the one property.
Okay. I guess when I presented it, when I brought it here, that's what I told them, but
Okay.
if you, like,
I can use these guys as copy, but I'll need 2 more extra so that I can put one in each file.
Okay, can I close the hearing now? I will call with your close.
didn't I submit like a 6
Yeah, you might.
copies?
Yeah, we have one.